Howdy. My name is Ryan McTiernan, obviously, and I wanted to make a very quick video about this Gibson Les Paul Standard 50s, the P90 edition. And what I really wanted to talk about, maybe it wasn't specifically this guitar, but maybe some of the myth, or myth making / heritage that Gibson have obviously acquired over hundreds of years, 100 plus years of history in guitars, starting with acoustics and mandolins and moving into obviously solid body electrics and all that kind of thing. So I work on guitars. I do guitar repairs and setups and things like that, as one of my jobs. And this really beautiful gold top came in recently, and if it doesn't have P90s, it's not a gold top to me. You got to have these soap bars in there. And if I'm being really pedantic, I'd want to see a wraparound tailpiece as well. I love that look, the original kind of the early Les Pauls that they were making. But this guitar came into me, and Gibson is a brand that, growing up for me as a young guitarist who looked at mostly metal and rock and hard rock bands, were my main influences when I started picking up the guitar. Metallica specifically was like the reason I really wanted to start playing guitar. And obviously they had a pretty famous, and still do, like ESP, LTD, brand endorsements and stuff like that, particularly James Hetfield. But they started off with Gibson Flying V's, and Kirk Hammett obviously had like a Fernandez Strat copy from Japan. But all the main bands that I looked to, Angus Young with AC/DC, Thin Lizzy, the Tony Iommi with Black Sabbath, like pretty much 90% of them were playing a Gibson or Gibson variant. When I was a younger player, Fender was like a complete no-no for me. I was like, nope, those guitars are not for rock, they're not for metal. I just completely was like, nope, it's got to be like a Gibson or equivalent. And the first kind of real guitar I had a couple of Richwoods, which were kind of import copies, and they were pretty good. I still have my very first guitar, an acoustic, but the first electric I had was a Richwood Super Strat copy. It was like 2 humbuckers, a bridge, kind of like, I guess, like an Ibanez ESP kind of thing, 24 frets. Don't have that anymore, and pretty ironic because I'm pretty ardent. I do not like Stratocasters or S-type guitars personally. But the first real guitar I got was an Epiphone Gothic Flying V, and that to me was obviously hitting all those metal and rock sweet spots, and it was the closest I was going to get to a Gibson. They're not a guitar that I've gotten to play as much as any other, really, of the kind of main brands. I've played Fenders and Gretsch and a lot of those, but Gibson is just, a lot of Epiphones. I own, I've owned a few Epiphones in my lifetime at the moment. I've got an Epiphone Firebird, which it's a really killer guitar. I'm going to put a Bigsby on it. I'm waiting for it at the moment. That's really excited to do that. But playing actual Gibsons is something that's few and far between in my guitar playing life for various reasons, and they still hold this place in my head where it's a Gibson. I can kind of up until Fender recently decided to become like the pantomime villain of the guitar community, Gibson has been kind of taking that role for a while now, because one, they were producing, according to many players on the internet and people that have purchased them, that they subpar quality for the price that they are and the name that they have. And there's so many brands that I love, and by saying kind of brands, I'm trying to fall into my capitalist hellscape mentality, but I look at kind of brands like Eastman. I own an Eastman acoustic, one of their kind of, I wouldn't even really call it entry level. It's not one of the top of the range ones, but it's an absolutely fabulous OM style guitar based on like a Martin, and it's absolutely fantastic. I get so many compliments for how it sounds and plays and different things like that. And I would love to, I've tried a couple of their electrics and they're great. And it's always in my mind about like maybe a Tokai, a Japanese import Tokai LP type guitar, or whatever you want to call it, a Gibson copy. And I still kind of feel myself gravitating towards that because I like the idea of either a bargain and or, you know, your own thing, as much as we can have our own thing in this day and age. But there's still something about like a Gibson when you see one, or when this was kind of dropped off to me to be worked on. Did a lot of, the big thing with this was the frets were like really rusty and just really dirty, so like I've completely cleaned those and polished them and buffed and everything. The rest of the guitar was in really good condition. It's a 2020 model, and there's just this thing about it, like, you know, the brown leather hard case and the big gold Gibson logo, and opening it up, and the smell of the nitrocellulose lacquer, like it does smell great. It is a really cool thing, and it's still in my head. You know, I'm playing guitar should I say, nearly 20 years this year. In October, November was when I started in 2006, which, you know, I try not to be one of those people where it's like I can't believe it, but sometimes I really can't believe it. And it's in my head of like, you know, oh, maybe, you know, to treat myself, you know, 20 years, get a Gibson, or, you know, splash out on something. And I don't know what it is, like, even though mentally I'm still in that position where there's still, like, you know, that appeal and that, I suppose, nostalgia. I don't know if it's really nostalgia, but just that feeling of, yeah, Gibsons are Gibsons. And I think that's maybe one of the taglines Mark Agnesi has in the Gibson brand of, like, you know, oh, this is great, but it's not a Gibson, or maybe they don't say that, but you can definitely imagine it. And I was playing this guitar, and it's a really great guitar. And, you know, after working on it, tweaking it, the setup, like the truss rod on this was like really loose, and the action was like lopsided. It was higher on the bass, like way too high on the bass side, or the other way around. I think it was too high on the treble side and too low on the bass side. Just weird stuff like that. So between that and the polished frets, like, it plays beautifully. Just playing a little bit of just like a Boss next tone 6L6 kind of sound. I'm using the Crazy Tube Circuits Falcon in like the Fender Princeton mode. I'm going to do videos about that. Don't want to be doing too much about gear really, but like it's a really cool pedal, and a bit of spring reverb from a Flint Strymon. So, you know, it plays really beautifully. But there's two things that keep going through my mind, and I'm kind of, you know, looking at this kind of guitar, like a new 2025 or 26 version of a 50s standard P90. You know, you're looking at like minimum about $2,500 for one of these, for various reasons. You know, brand name, heritage, you know, made in America, which still has its premium, and obviously coming from the Gibson factory. And like, to be fair, once I've kind of got things adjusted, it does play really really nice. The you know, the neck, the frets are pretty good. Really impressed with, like, you know, the electrics and the pickups, like all that stuff is really really good. And I know it's a nitro finish, all those kind of things, but like I kind of find myself going like, is it a 2.5? Like, is it worth $2,500? And for some people, absolutely, it's worth more. For me, I'm not as certain, you know, and that's not just on this guitar. It's really, as I said, it's great, you know, and I really really like it. And I've, you know, Les Pauls, I've had a couple, you know, again, copies of Epiphone out of Bernie, and I feel like I don't really gel with the body shape a whole lot. I feel like the SG is something that I do kind of prefer playing wise. I obviously love the Firebird, to be honest, is like my favourite, probably because it's the most Fender type, ironically, for the guy who hated Fender growing up, because of his very insular, silly mind. But yeah, I don't, it's not something I'm still yet to kind of really click with it or find the one for me, as they say. But yeah, I just kind of find myself going, you know, would I really get the most out of this, like, as not just an investment financially, but like musically? Because I don't feel like what I love to play and write comes out when I play these type of guitars. And as much as, like, I kind of hate to say it, like, a part of me still has it in my brain of like, well, owning a Gibson, you know, you're a real guitar player, you own one, and that's just not how things should work, you know, and that's something I've been guilty of for many, many times in my life. And I feel like maybe with Gibsons, especially the semi-hollow and hollow body electric guitars, obviously I'm pretty sure like if you wanted like a baseline ES335, like a standard kind of model, I'm pretty sure it's at least an extra $1,000 above what these are, so $3,500 minimum, I'm pretty sure. I can kind of see how like maybe with those type of guitars, that extra money and value, like compared to say like an Epiphone or maybe like an alternative brand like an Eastman or Stanford, obviously one of the variants of Maybach, I'm pretty sure. I feel like maybe there you really feel and find that, you know, real difference in quality. Now I'm not saying this isn't better or worse or whatever than an Epiphone or anything like that. I actually did have an Epiphone 56 Gold Top, which I moved on because I just did not like it. I think the pickups in it were Wilkinsons actually, and I know they've got a pretty good reputation, but I didn't like them, and maybe if I'd have changed them, but I just never, you know, what I will say about like this guitar particularly, like, you know, it is quite vibrant and you can feel it and stuff like that, but you know, it's not like you maybe in your mind you still see it this magical thing, like you play it, you strum it, and you know it'll resonate and ring forever. And yeah, I don't know, I guess it's just one of those things that as a guitar player and as a musician and as a person really I'm trying to move away from, is that mental obsession with stuff, but also brands and things that may not equate the way we think. So yeah, that's my mild ramblings of this, not just this beautiful little Les Paul P90 Gold Top, but Gibson and brands like that in general. I don't know what that means for the wider future of my life. I may still own a Gibson one day, but I'm not sure if it'll be a Les Paul type. I feel like it would still be an SG if I was going to. But anyway, if maybe you own one, or maybe you've owned one in the past, and you know, if you've a similar experience, let me know. You know, I'd love to hear what other people's experience with the brand is, or with those type of situations, whether it's maybe a PRS you're really into and you just wanted it because it was a PRS, or even Fender. You know, Fender obviously have a little bit more of an entry level price point between the Mexican range, and obviously Fender Japan would be, you know, can be cheaper than the American standard American models, but maybe it's the same thing. Maybe you've been caught by that, oh, I just wanted it because of the name and I preferred this other guitar. But there's always different trade-offs, and like some instruments obviously can be a little bit more resilient for gigs and, you know, constant touring and stuff like that, whereas others maybe not. But for now, that's all I gotta say on this guitar. We'll see you later.